As of last week, we had the Eagles winning the Super Bowl 21% of the time.
Whoa,
that's a pretty big number. You got your Mega Mac guys here on Birds 365. We are graced with the presence of Aaron Schatz from FootballOutsiders.com, who is looking longingly at something to his left. What the hell you got your eyes on there, buddy?
Playoff odds, in case you asked me what our odds were for the Eagles to win the Super Bowl.
We'll start
right well,
there.
Where are those odds?
For the Eagles to win the Super Bowl right now.
I have not run the new ones this week yet that include yesterday's game. As of last week, we had the Eagles winning the Super Bowl 21% of the time.
Whoa,
that's a pretty big number.
Now, you were on this team, Aaron, preseason. So you were on this team. I do this every day, and I was not on this team as a significant Super Bowl contender preseason. Obviously, we all are now. Why were you on this bandwagon so early?
First of all, the amount of talent that they added in the offseason on both sides of the ball. I mean, we knew already from last year, right? They were a playoff team. They had a very strong offensive line. There were some good players on defense, but by adding Bradbury, Reddick, Kazir White, getting Brandon Graham back from injury, and then on the offensive side of the ball, adding A.J. Brown, that's just a lot of talent added in one offseason. And when you combine that with the fact that they had the easiest projected schedule in the league, that put them at number one. Now, we didn't have them as the best team in our ratings projection. We actually had Tampa Bay and the Rams ahead of them. But because of the schedule, first of all, we had them higher than anyone else.
Yeah.
And then because of the schedule, I was predicting they would make it to the Super Bowl because I thought they had the inside track on the number one seed, which they do.
And exactly right. It's 6-0. But the one thing about the projections you mentioned, you didn't project, we didn't project, nobody projected the NFC East would be the best division in football and have it not even be close. They are so far the best division in football. It's scary. So that easy Eagles schedule might not be as easy as you, me, or anybody else thought at the beginning of the season.
Well, first of all, the AFC South is still terrible. And that's 4 games.
Yeah, that's true.
Also, our numbers do not like the New York Giants. I mean, I'm getting a little sick. I'm getting a little sick of talking about this week after week, but they keep rolling 7s. It's really ridiculous, the streak they're on of just luck in close games. They're really an average team this year. Now, that's much better than we thought before the season. I thought the Giants were going to be the worst team in the league.
Really?
They're much better than I expected. And Brian Daboll is coach of the year, and it is not even close. But
I'm with you. I'm with you on Brian Daboll.
Going forward, they look like an average team. They do not look like the kind of team you would imagine is 6-1. Now, Dallas is very good. Dallas has been very good, but the Eagles already played them once and beat them.
Yeah. Well, Cooper Rush, I think if Dallas with that defense, if Dak Prescott starts to play like Dak Prescott, I look at the teams behind the Eagles, and you mentioned the Giants, Aaron. I'm with you with the Giants. I don't know how they're winning these games. I'm kind of that same way with Minnesota. I don't think that's a very good team.
Yep, we have Dallas, Minnesota also. We have Minnesota lower than the Giants.
Dallas is a good team. I don't think they're a great team, but I think they're a good team. So if you look at number 2 in the NFC, is that where you are? The Dallas Cowboys?
Yes, I think the Dallas Cowboys are the number 2 team in the NFC. Their defense is number 2 in our ratings behind Buffalo, and their offense has been average with a backup quarterback, and it should be better with Dak Prescott back. So yes, I actually do think Dallas is the second best team in the NFC, but the likelihood is they're going to win a wild card. They're going to have to win 3 games on the road to make the Super Bowl, and that's really hard to do.
I got a text during the show from Coach Nick, and it said, tell Aaron undefeated means undefeated for both the Eagles and the Coach of the Year award. He just wanted to.
He's the favorite. I believe he is the betting favorite.
Yeah, he has
Coach of the Year. Yeah. But to me, it's not. I mean, he's taken a very good team and made it great. Dable took a team that looked terrible to 6-1. I mean, awful.
I thought before the season, and I said this to Jody, I thought there were two teams that were clearly tanking and building. Not, I don't want to use that term tanking, but building for the future. Chicago and the Giants.
Yeah.
Those were the two teams that I thought, well, they're just, this is a loss ledger this year for them. And all of a sudden he's got them at 6-1.
Our line before the season is we don't like their roster and we don't think they like their roster either, because we were very big on Dable and we were very big on Shane, the general manager. But we just thought that the players that they were working with, it just wasn't going to be good. And their defense has been awful this year, honestly, except in the most important moments, their defense gets it together. Yeah. And their offense has been way better than anybody expected.
Yeah, I would say the Giants are the team in the NFL right now that can trump analytics. Crunch the numbers. They tell you what they tell you, and then you look up and go, oh, shoot, but they're 6-1, and they made the big play. They tackled Christian Kirk at the 1-yard line on the last play yesterday. That's all that matters. They didn't get into the end zone.
Mike Tenier is our South Jersey-based Eagles fan writer. Yeah. He compared them to the 2011 Tebow Mania Broncos. Like those Broncos Tebow teams just kept winning games that they couldn't possibly win, but eventually they ran out of games.
Yeah, and but I'll bring the Vikings back in the conversation as well, Aaron. Somebody has to win the NFC North. So some of these teams have to make the playoffs. The Vikings might have to make the playoff. The Giants might have to make the playoffs, especially if Tampa Bay, Green Bay, the Rams don't get it together. Why have those three teams? Because those were the three teams we all looked at. What has gone wrong in those particular cities?
Okay, I'll take them from the top to the bottom by our ratings. Tampa Bay is more about bad luck. Their offense has been average, but not terrible. Brady was missing throws yesterday, but for the most of the season, Brady has been fine. Like not spectacular, but pretty good in our numbers. Their running game is really struggling. Their offensive line, particularly up the middle, just lost too many guys to injury. Their defense is still playing really well. So Tampa is the best of those three teams by my numbers. Green Bay, first of all, everybody thought they were going to have a top 10 defense. There was really not much to support that idea. Like they haven't had a top 10 defense in years. Why were they suddenly going to have a top 10 defense this year? They don't have a top 10 defense. They have a below average defense. And on offense, Rodgers is just not in sync with his receivers at all. And again, offensive line problems, like Bakhtiari just can't get healthy and stay healthy. And so they've had to shuffle their offensive line constantly, and their special teams are a huge problem. And then the Rams, again, like we're going back to the same well with these teams. Offensive line.
Yeah.
And what's the biggest strength of the Eagles is the offensive line. Like offensive line is really important. Hard to measure with analytics, but really important.
Let me ask about those three teams from another aspect. Coaching. We know that two of them have boy genius, offensive-minded head coaches that are very well thought of across the league, maybe overrated. And you got one guy stepping in for a coach who won a Super Bowl, who I think of as a great defensive coordinator and hasn't been and shouldn't be a head coach in the National Football League. How much of an impact is coaching having on the Bucs, Rams, and the Packers struggles?
First of all, I'd give Todd Bowles a little more time. I wouldn't blame what's happening in Tampa Bay on Todd Bowles at all. I mean, especially because his side of the ball is still playing really, really well. I'd have to look closer, at specific games to see if there are specific decisions. But like I said, so much of this has to do with offensive line problems on all three teams. And a lot of that is injuries or players retiring. And there's nothing a head coach can do about that. So, I don't look at what's going on with those teams and feel like it's coaching. I think the biggest coaching problem right now for those three teams is the inability of Matt LaFleur to handle Aaron Rodgers' ego. right? Like we talk
Yeah.
about like
Well, that's
things in
really
some season are
difficult.
measurable and things that
Yeah, who
coaches are
could?
not measurable.
Yeah.
And one thing that's not measurable is how you manage your locker
Yeah.
room and how you motivate your players. And it's
Yeah.
clear that in Green Bay, there is a locker room management issue going on.
Yeah. I'm surprised it hasn't developed a little bit more quickly, to be honest, because Aaron, when Matt LaFleur came in, not a big name, and Aaron's Aaron. So I'm surprised it lasted as long as it did. What here in Philadelphia, we get a lot of this, Aaron. So I want to run this by you. The Eagles haven't beaten anybody. We mentioned the schedule. They can't beat anybody by these definitions because nobody's good outside Kansas City and Buffalo. And so until you get to those two teams, nobody's beaten anybody. What this league is so parity driven. Isn't there something to say when a team does distance itself, like the Eagles have so far in the NFC?
This year has more parity than any year that I can remember. Like our ratings have a lower standard deviation after 6 or 7 weeks than they've ever had after 6 or 7 weeks because the teams are so close together. And the team that's really far ahead is not Philadelphia. Philadelphia is in number 2, and they're ahead of everybody else, but they're not far ahead of everybody else. Buffalo is the team that is far ahead of everybody else, right?
And they should be, by the way.
Super Bowl favorites right now. But yeah, look, Philadelphia, who can they play that everybody's going to be like, well, I mean, they beat such and such, so that they've proven themselves. I mean, I think Dallas, like even with Cooper Rush, I know it's Cooper Rush, but that defense is really good. I think beating Dallas proves something. I think Tampa Bay is still a good team, and I think in the next couple of weeks we'll see that they establish that they're still a good team. But yeah, I mean, the other problem is that most of the top teams are in the AFC, and the Eagles play the bad AFC division, right? They don't play Baltimore, they don't play Cincinnati, they don't play Buffalo, and they don't play Kansas City.
All right, let me run this by both of you two guys. Get your take on it. John makes a good point about the Eagles can't blow anybody away with their play now because they're scheduled to play 3 very beatable teams in a row. How about if this happens? The Eagles play a game and they score 10 points in the first quarter and 10 points in the second quarter and then 10 points in the third quarter and 10 points in the fourth quarter because they've had this unbelievable run of second quarters, most points ever, 6 weeks in the NFL in the second quarter. But in the second half, not scoring near as much. To their credit, when they really need a ball control drive to put a game away, they've been able to do that. Time-consuming ball, but they have the perfectly balanced 4-quarter, 60-minute game. 10 points, 10 points, 10 points, 10 points, and they hold the opponents to 3 and 3 and 3 and 3, and they blow somebody out 40-12, and they have this great. Would then everybody go, oh, shoot, yeah, the Eagles are the unquestioned second-best team behind the maybe they haven't caught the Bills yet, but they're that good. They haven't had that 60-minute game yet. Is that the key to make everybody believe in the Eagles?
I'll make 3 points. The first is I think that the Kansas City offense is so explosive when it's at its best that even if numbers say the Eagles are better than Kansas City, and my numbers say they are, the average fan is still going to think Kansas City is better because we can't see those two teams on the same field.
Yeah.
The second thing I'll say is those kinds of quarter-by-quarter splits are completely inconsistent and non-predictive, except for certain teams being better or worse on like the first 15 scripted plays. So that second quarter thing for the Eagles is absolutely not going to continue. Like they're going to be better in the other 3 quarters and not as good in the second quarter.
Okay.
And then the last thing I'll say is this. We keep talking about who have they beat. My research shows pretty definitively that the best way to identify a championship team is the way they destroy their bad opponents. So you learn from the Eagles. The Eagles may have bad opponents, but if they keep destroying them, you've learned they're really good.
That makes sense because if you beat who you're supposed to, that's half the battle in the NFL.
And beat them big.
Yeah, and beat them big. So I go back to week 2. What is now a 5-1 team, and we talked about, you and I both don't necessarily believe in Minnesota. Why is that not what is it about Minnesota that we don't believe in? I'll let you describe it. Why is that a team that we're not saying, oh, that's a signature win? They're 5-1.
I mean, first of all, their wins, like the Giants' wins, are close. Other than week 1 against Green Bay, their other 4 wins have been very close. Their defense has not been good, Minnesota. Their offense has actually underperformed. This is one of Kirk Cousins' worst years.
I know, it's
Kirk Cousins
amazing.
is very consistent. I know people don't
Yeah.
think of Kirk Cousins as consistent, but he's consistently like the 10th best quarterback in the league. And this year, he's like the 14th best quarterback in the league. So it's like a little lower than usual. And their defense has been below average, and they've gotten a lot of close wins. And yeah, they don't feel for real. Last week, I did a list of, by our numbers, going back to 1981, the worst teams to be 5-1. And the Vikings and Giants were the 2 and 3 on the list of the worst 5-1 teams.
I think that perfectly sums up those 2 teams right now.
I mean, the Giants eventually are going to get the horseshoe out of their tuchus, and they're going to lose some games.
They've got, maybe it's a magic carpet ride thing. Maybe I'm not dealing with the numbers and the stats and the facts the way you do, but they're starting to scare me from an Eagle perspective.
I mean, they've got great coaching, and Dable, I give Dable credit for player motivation and locker room management and calling plays. Like offensively, they seem to call just the right play at just the right time. Yeah. But man, the Eagles will be favored over them by like a touchdown.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we got a couple of weeks to wait for that. All right, jumping back over to the other conference for just a second, because my partner on Ion Football on Sundays on CBS Sports Radio asked me if we acknowledge that the Bills and the Chiefs are the best 2 teams in the AFC, and then there's a drop-off, who comes in at number 3? And my response yesterday, maybe I was a victim of the moment. Cincinnati looked so good offensively yesterday. Burrow was so good. I said, we're kind of forgetting. We're only 9 months removed from them being in the Super Bowl because they got off to an 0-2 start. They kind of became out of sight, out of mind. Are the Bengals the 3rd best team in the AFC right now?
I would put Baltimore 3 and Cincinnati 4.
It's a good team, Cincinnati. And by the way, their big Achilles heel, Aaron, last year was obviously the offensive line.
Yeah.
They did a lot of work on that in the offseason. It seems to be paying dividends. A little bit of a slow start, but how much better has the offensive line been?
At least better. Not as much as
they wanted.
L. Collins has struggled at right tackle. But it's been a little bit better. And then some of the problem is Burrow just takes sacks.
He does.
It's a quarterback thing. A lot of sacks are a quarterback thing, and he just takes sacks. And they can fix the offensive line all they want, and he's still going to take sacks.
Yeah. Yeah, he holds on to the ball.
He believes he's never going to get touched. He believes he's going to make the miraculous play. He and Mahomes are a lot alike in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and they often do. The difference is Mahomes doesn't take as many sacks. Mahomes, it looks like he thinks he's going to make the miraculous play, and then he either does or he throws it away, whereas Burrow takes sacks.
Yeah. Now, since we're talking about quarterbacks, I got to get your thoughts on Jalen Hurts because he's a unique player. Obviously, early in the season, I think you saw more vertical stuff than you're seeing now. So I think people are adjusting. But either way, he makes it very difficult on opposing defenses. And I see, by the way, to a lesser degree, but some similar stuff now with Daniel Jones and the Giants and the way Brian Daboll and Mike Kafka are using him. They're starting to use his athleticism, which I don't think people realize how athletic Daniel Jones is. But when you're grading quarterbacks, how do you do that when you have unique players who who stress the defense maybe in unconventional ways.
Dual threat Danny, baby. That's what we're calling him.
Yeah.
Dual threat Danny. Yeah, it's interesting because, one thing I do, you have to sort of rank quarterbacks because, like, for example, I have an all pro vote. I have to have one of them is better than the other ones because I only get to vote for one.
Yeah.
Right. But I prefer to look at quarterbacks or players in general as a mix of strengths and weaknesses rather than as like a number that defines how good they are. And so, yeah, it's when you have a player like Jalen Hurts who has multiple strengths and can do a lot of different things, that's very valuable. And I said before the season that even if Hurts was what he was last year, which was a great runner and a slightly above average passer, I thought that was good enough to take the Eagles to the Super Bowl given their schedule. But he's been better than that, right? His passing has absolutely improved. I don't have the numbers in front of me right now to see how much the up the middle thing has been solved, but I know he's passing up the middle at least a little bit more than he did last year, which is good. More of the field you can use, then the more you stress the defense, right? If you never pass up the middle, they don't have to put their safeties in the middle. But yeah, and the other thing about Hurts is that, like a lot of these other quarterbacks, like Lamar Jackson, and like, by the way, Daniel Jones, which teams are going to have to learn this, you can't play as much man against him because if you turn your back to him, he takes off. And so it changes what a defense can do against him.
Yeah, except the Turp Monster got him again.
Can't be tripping up, DJ. I want your take on this because we always like playing with Eagle fans and on our stream and Twitter and my WIP phones. The Eagle fans seem to want to add another big name. Not surprising. That's the way Eagle fans. That's
always
the way a lot of them.
Always.
I'm not going to just drop this on the Eagle fans' laps because every fan base, or
That's
almost
true.
every fan base, does the same. Give us a superstar. Give us a recognizable name. Give us a shiny new toy. Well, the one that everyone is talking about this week is Brian Burns, a defensive end from Carolina. The price is going to be what the price is going to be, and if the Eagles were willing to pay it, which neither John nor I think they will be, how would they incorporate him? What do your numbers say about the Eagles' defensive ends? Do they desperately need an upgrade? Could they use an upgrade? What the hell are we talking defensive end for? They're perfectly fine there. What are your numbers on the Eagles' DE so far this year?
I mostly feel like, why are we talking about an upgrade? They're fine there. What it does is, here's the thing. The Eagles have always prided themselves on depth on the defensive line, both at tackle and at end, where they can bring in waves of guys. So having Burns absolutely improves your ability to bring in waves of guys. Like you've got your first couple guys, and then if they sit down, you got your next couple guys. But they've got a really good pass rush right now. They've got Graham and they've got Hassan Reddick. And is it worth the cost of 2 first-round picks to add Brian Burns? It's not that he's not a good player. He's a very good player. It's just, it's a strength that the Eagles already have. I think that if you think about what the biggest need might be for the Eagles, it's something that I don't think is really on the market, which is some kind of like a real game-changing slot receiver, right? With Brown and Smith on the outside to improve that third spot, maybe. But otherwise, this team, any improvement you're going to make is going to be small, and that's not worth 2 first-round picks.
No, not at all. The big name trap is what Joe Banner calls it. But Brian Burns is a very good player. So
very good.
He is Aaron Schatz at FO_A Schatz. You can follow him on Twitter. Editor-in-chief of Football Outsiders with our buddy Mike Tanier, as you mentioned. I do want to end it on the offensive line because I think, you bring up, that's what the Eagles do. They build up run on both sides of the football. You just talked about it. Defensive line. I'm going to talk about it. Offensive line. We got into it a little bit with some of these struggling teams. It seems that's the theme. Offensive line, injuries. Giants, by the way, just lost 2 offensive linemen. That could be their market correction. Is there anything bigger besides quarterback play? I'll put that aside. That judges successful NFL teams better than good offensive line play? Or am I overstating that?
I don't know. I think I would still put your wide receivers and your cornerbacks ahead of your offensive line. Here's the thing, and I'll give some credit to Pro Football Focus for writing about this a lot. Offensive line is a weak link system, okay? Which means that it's more important to not have bad offensive linemen than it is to have good offensive linemen. Like you can have a top left tackle and that's swell, but if your right guard and your right tackle are not good, now we know what the defense will attack. Like you can't have holes on your offensive line. And what the Eagles have done, I mean, we can talk about how much Mailata has developed, and we can talk about Jason Kelce and whether he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. But what the Eagles really have done well over the last few years is never have a weakness.
That's a good point. And part of that has been the depth because they've had their fair share of injuries. Well, shoot. Everybody on their offensive line was hurting going into the bye.
Depth on offensive line.
They plug in guys, and the drop off isn't as great as it is in some other places.
I mean, look, they blew a first-round pick, right? I mean, Dillard, right? Yeah. They blew a first-round pick, and because of depth and scouting and coaching and whatever else has gone into my life, they've totally made up for it.
Yeah, it's called Stoutland University.
Stoutland University. That's right.
Mailata clued us into that on Sunday Night Football before the bye. Aaron, great stuff. Appreciate you hopping on board. You always educate us when you come on. You know we're going to be bringing you back into class again. Thanks for doing it today.
Hey, thanks for having me on. FootballOutsiders.com. Hope everybody will check out all of our content.
Thank you.